Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I went for a walk. I know, shock horror, outside daylight nature, the whole thing, in a local national park, for the first time in too many years. Almost immediately I noticed that this would be an excellent location for an activation. If you're not familiar, it's an amateur radio excuse to set up a portable station in a new location. In this case, potentially something called POTA, or Parks on the Air, but you don't need to find a formal activity with rules to get on air and make noise. I commented on how easily accessible it was, that it had picnic tables, gazebos for shelter, nearby toilets, free barbecues, ample parking, lots of open space, and no overhead power lines. I saw one solar panel on a pole and no evidence of any other electrical noise sources. It wasn't until later that I realized the act of noticing this in that way, with those details, is not something I would have done before becoming a radio amateur. I'd have looked at the same location, considered its beauty and serenity, and perhaps in passing considered that we could have a family gathering or a place to come back to when I wanted some peace and quiet, or a place where I might have a barbecue with friends. Not that those things went away, just that I noticed other things now that I'm an amateur. It made me consider just how much this hobby has irrevocably changed me. I know I've mentioned this before. Since becoming an amateur, I cannot walk down the street without noticing TV antennas pointing in the wrong direction. But this change in me is not limited to that. Now I cannot help discussing the best place to put a Wi-Fi base station in a building, or thinking about and checking on solar activity, wondering about battery capacity, RF interference, trees to potentially use as skyhooks for wire antennas, power company substations, pole-top transformers, random weird and wonderful antennas, and probably more. The point being that this hobby opens the door to a whole new way of looking at the world, and I don't think I've overstated if I say that amateur radio has literally changed my worldview. In considering this, I suspect it's related to a cognitive bias known as the frequency illusion, where you notice a specific concept, word or product more often after becoming aware of it. You might, for example, have experienced this with the brand or model of radio you use and suddenly discovered that there's lots of other amateurs talking about that particular piece of equipment. I've seen this with recurring topics during the past 14 years of the weekly F-TroopNet. For example, every couple of years someone discovers magnetic loop antennas and starts talking about how they've built or bought one. The conversation inevitably goes past variable capacitors through air variable capacitors onto vacuum variable capacitors, and then the conversation generally stops. While it's happening, multiple people come on the same journey, only to follow the exact same path. Several years later, the cycle repeats. Don't misunderstand, I welcome the discussion, point people at relevant resources and help them on this journey. I'm commenting on the recurrence of the journey, not the nature of it, because it's easy to take this example and hold it up as there's nothing new in this hobby. But nothing could be further from the truth. In my opinion, the level of complexity associated with radio communications is infinite, and anyone, including you and I, can contribute to the discovery associated with it. So what things have you noticed that were caused by this somewhat eccentric hobby, and perhaps the phenomenon of frequency illusion? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.